Is there an agenda to take America down? Are we living in the epiphany of a one-world government? Today, I have Victor Marx with me and his friend Colonel Jeff Teague. We're going to get into a heated discussion about what's going on in the world. I'm Drenda. This is Drenda on Guard. Let's get into it. Last time we talked to Victor Marx, we were talking about his personal journey and how he's been used to go into third world nations and save women and children, orphans and widows. Today, we're going to talk about what's going on geopolitically. What's going on with Ukraine? Are we facing World War III? What are our leaders doing? And what kind of game is being played? Are we in a game of chess and we don't know the outcome? Today, joining me also, not only Victor, hi Victor, good to have you back, but also your good friend, Colonel Jeff Teague. Now tell us about Jeff. Good to have you, Jeff.
Well, Jeff is actually our new president of our organization.
Super.
All things possible. So I'm looking for work. I was kicked out and I'm CEO.
They have to have you on the front lines. They have to have somebody in the brains in the seat behind
Trust you me, our relationship is actually the first time we met
in Iraq.
He knocks on my door at our safe house, and I think it was something to the effect of, "Hey, I need a gun, a couple of grenades, and I was like, oh, great, come on in. Honey, we got guests. So the life.
That's a greeting in Iraq when you live in Iraq.
Yeah, that's Iraq. But I call him the good colonel. Colonel Teague's retired from special operations. I'll just introduce you because you never talk about it.
Can you make it as embarrassing as
Yes,
possible?
I will. I'm just going to lather this up.
Yes.
He was a Ranger who went into SF, which is a Green Beret. He was enlisted, then went to college and actually became an officer. And then he passed selection qualification and went into the counterterrorism unit of Delta Force. So 10 years at Delta, 1,000 missions, never lost a man. He's been a recipient of 5 Bronze Stars and a Silver with V for Valor. His exploits as a military fighter and a leader are honestly legendary. And I know you hate this is bad. Don't worry, he's bad at a lot of stuff, but hunting bad guys and leading people, he's great at. So I'm so thankful for him. We've worked together for many years now, done some stuff in Iraq, places we never thought to hear. So yeah, we're excited.
I want to hear a story that was like the most meaningful story that when you think about what you do, maybe it's a mission you guys did together, the one that inspires you and keeps you going, doing these things, saving widows, orphans. And then I also want to talk about what's going on geopolitically.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to talk about 2 different ones, and one of them is when I was on the board of ATP, but I wasn't working as the CEO yet when you called me.
Yeah.
Because it was one of those things that it didn't seem like a meaningful event. It was the right thing to do.
Right.
But I think what's interesting with Vic and I, we're quite similar in many ways, but God has definitely given us different strengths and weaknesses. And the idea of strategy and planning and building teams and really moving towards a mission is something that I've been trained to do, and I've done it all my life. But in many ways, we're just setting the stage for when Vic and Eileen come in afterwards. So what we've done with Iraq, we became very well known with recovering girls that were enslaved by ISIS, Yazidi Christian girls, Assyrian Christian girls. That's where, like Victor said, it kind of came up. ATP really rose to the prominence. Well, that's over now. There are still women that are being set free. There are still women that are escaping. We just had a woman in our safe house just a few months ago. We call her Rosa. Yeah. She was enslaved by ISIS for 8 years. Yeah. So
she got abducted at 11 years old.
At 11 years old.
Was in Syria.
Yep.
No hope.
A Christian girl?
Nope.
No.
Because I know they target sometimes Christians,
Yeah.
but she was Muslim and they still enslaved her?
Yep.
Yeah. That's what people don't understand about that organization. They don't care. They're considered a virus even among Muslims. But yeah, without hope, 48 hours after we were in country on that mission, she was in her house. Rosa, broke nose, messed up back, biggest smile, You ever, right? And we're like, I remember saying, Rosa, why are you smiling? She goes, because I'm free.
Wow.
And y'all are helping me.
Wow.
So we set the stage. Victor and Eileen have the hand of God on them when it comes to healing and relating to people that are suffering from trauma all over the world. And then we kind of put them back into the ATP process. So that's overseas, and it's the same here in the United States. So we are constantly pushing lead packets to law enforcement to identify girls that are being sold online. It's happening in every city in America.
In America.
In America.
In America.
Right here in
This isn't over in Iraq.
America.
This is
Right.
America. Human trafficking, young girls being sold, and
Yep.
boys.
So what the process looks like is there are sites online that you go to order up a young girl, a woman. It's as easy as ordering a pizza. You go to the site, you decide what you want, blonde, brunette, whatever race she comes from. You can list the different sex acts that you're interested in, and then there's a listed price. You can haggle for that price, and then you order that girl. So that commercial sex industry is rampant across the United States. And the girls are all anonymous. They have fake names. You don't know who they are. That's what makes the difficulty for law enforcement to figure out what's happening. So our team spends our time putting an identity to that girl and telling her story. So when we push that lead to law enforcement and they call that girl in, they pretend that they're a buyer, and that girl shows up, she thinks she's going to be conducting a sex act. She thinks she's going to be getting raped. Instead, law enforcement meets her, and they know her name, and they know her story, and they know her mom, and they know her children, and they say, Cindy, we know you, and we see you, and there's another life waiting for you. We want them to know that God loves them. So when you are able to provide that level of information and intimacy with a young gal, it's a much different sale for her to try to move out. Now, when you couple that with arresting her predator, her trafficker, now she's beginning to see the light. So those are all the things that ATP does. But one of the operations
All Things Possible.
All Things Possible.
ATP, all Things Possible Ministries.
So that's what we do. Those are the nuts and bolts of what we do. But the last sting that we participated in, that Vic was talking about on the last show with Homeland Security, you now get these girls back to the law enforcement agency, and many of them have a soft room similar to this, where you're able to sit and talk with these girls. And to have Vic and Eileen to be able to come in, bring one of the dogs, the girl can pet the dog, they can talk to her, and really, really instill that God has something else for them. Those are the magical moments that I think God has brought us together for.
Yeah, and most people don't understand real human trafficking in the sex industry. My wife and I and our teams, we actually go to the porn industry, set up a booth, move in and out among all the sex workers in that industry. And the only pushback we ever got was from Christians. Going, what in the world are y'all doing? We're going, we're being light in a dark spot. What? It's great. And women would come by and go, why are y'all here? We go, we care about you. We care about mental health. We share videos of us recovering and rescuing kids. They're like, oh my gosh. And they're trapped, they're ensnared. So at whatever angle, now we hunt bad guys. This is all, we make people pay.
It's part of the hunt.
It is part of the hunt. But a beautiful story, I'm thinking of Candace, where she comes to one of our trainings, what we were talking about earlier, right? At our training center in Colorado Springs, we've got an incredible facility. From a shoot house to a range to a training center, dojo. I mean, it's beautiful. God has really put his hand of blessing on it. So she trains, we pray for her, she gets set free. She'd come out of that industry because of one of our team members has been helped her and spending time with her. And God gave her, after being prayed for, the strength to now turn on her trafficker, the guy who was pimping her out. She has a horrific life. But because of that, we were able to do some things that otherwise we couldn't. She actually trusted God with her life and was able to take responsibility for some things she had done illegally, and she got favor from the courts. But here's the most powerful I'm gonna share that about. You know, when darkness invades a family or a person's life, it becomes systemic. Everybody feels it. Her daughter young girl was being abused by the stepfather. Nobody knew. Certainly Candace didn't. And this little girl had come to the same training with her mom, experienced everything. And I'll never forget, I prayed for her, but at one point, I just held her. I just held her. And what we've realized is that there are a lot of girls and women never been held.
In a non-sexual way, just by a
By-
dad, a father,
Yes.
a love, the love of God.
A protector.
Protector.
And God's love will flow through. When they left, she herself got the power of God to speak the truth. And now, just like you said at the end, if there's anybody abusing you, she came and told her mom. And the abuse sexually was horrific. We wouldn't even repeat it. It's so demonic to destroy her mind. And within 4 days, we had a target package with a SWAT team that hit that dude's house. And this is going to sound odd to some of your listeners, but you don't work in the space we do, you know. And there's light, and there's gray light, and then there's black. And sometimes in the real world things happen, but we pray sometime when a pedophile gets cornered and police have to engage, or us with them, that the good people will not get hurt. If you remember FBI, 2 agents were killed by a pedophile. They went to serve a warrant, boom, boom. So we pray, Lord, if the person's unrepentant, there's not a chance, let them take their own life so no one gets hurt. The guy killed himself. Save the girl from having to go to court, being re-abused again and again, all the craziness.
Right.
Justice was brought. The girl was free. Her mom is now on our team.
Awesome.
So,
But it was her mom's courage
yes.
and your ministry connecting that gave the daughter courage to say, this isn't just happening to you, this is happening to me.
Yes. So from the street, with our team member Samantha, growing, loving, caring for her, because again, everybody wants the romantic deal where you smash the bad guy rescue and everything's fine. It's not fine. When people have been horrifically abused, it took me 123 visits to a trauma specialist in 9 months to help get my mind in a place of healing. And God used an amazing woman. People can watch it on my movie, the Victor Marx story. It's in 15 languages on YouTube. But God healed and restored my mind through a process of me removing the lies I'd believed from the trauma with the truth of who I really was. Otherwise, psychiatrists saying, you'll never make it, you'll never function. It's like, yeah, watch what God can do.
Yeah. That's why your ministry is called All Things Possible.
Yes.
And this young girl we're talking about was with us just last weekend. She came to her second event. And that's going back to that original question. I think I have my own covering from God that He has walked with me throughout my life. But I also appreciate the covering that Vic and Eileen give us. And when we go through these events with these trauma survivors, it's just amazing the amount of trust that they put into us. So just like Victor talks about the hug, that's how we use jiu-jitsu. That's how I end up with an eye like this, is jiu-jitsu. But we use jiu-jitsu as like a 4-hour hug. It's such a close, intimate martial art that you're working with these women and you're teaching them to regain control
And confidence.
of their own bodies and to recognize that what happened to them was back then and this is now. And they're integrated with men, and we do jiu-jitsu with them. So it's not just a hug that lasts 10 or 15 seconds. They come with us on this journey through jiu-jitsu where it is just a very intimate, empowering thing. And then the Spirit shows up and just blesses all of it.
And it's a science of leverage and technique, that empowers them, but they've sensed God's presence through it all. So yeah, there's a practical aspect that gives them a level of trust, and we see God move. So that's our kind of our healing portion. We call those Samantha
awesome.
weekends.
Incredible. That's great. I want to move to and talk about, from a governmental standpoint. You know, we've seen things in the last years that we couldn't believe.
Right.
The Jeffrey Epstein story, and to learn the connections with high-profile political operatives, political Congress, as well as people in corporations, and all the way.
Which everything you're saying is one of the reasons why we feel, in some ways, it's harder in America to do what we do than it is in other countries.
So Iraq prepared you to do what you're doing in America, but it's tougher here.
Yeah. We still do it in other countries.
Because there's so many tentacles.
How would you?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what would shock your listeners is what I'm concerned about in Iraq is that they're going to become like America. So the wholesale abuse and rape by ISIS is coming to a close. But now they're finding peace, they're finding freedom, they're finding wealth. They're all traumatized from decades of war and oppression. And they're looking to America, they look to the West. What does it mean to be successful? You go to Iraq, they're driving Lamborghinis, they're driving Ferraris,
Wow.
they have beautiful large houses. Their families are absolutely broken and
Which
destroyed.
the deceitfulness of
Yep.
that actually can be a false cure without God. The corruption is
including Christianity.
Yep.
When you go into an area of like Kurdistan, the Christian community is the one that ushers in more of Americanization versus the Muslim. If you want to drink, if you want to go to clubs, if you want to, you go into the Christian controlled area. You'll see a girl walking dressed like a hooker. It's so rare, but you'll see her in the mall and you go, what? Guarantee you she's coming out of the Christian community.
So Christianity gives them the freedom to sin. And the Bible says you're not to have that freedom to sin, but they're taking that freedom and now it converts into, we can do anything we want to do.
And they're equating it to
Do we not see that here in America?
America.
Again, it goes back to that conversation about right, wrong, 10 Commandments, justice, enforcing
plumb
that.
line.
Too many churches are like, attitude is, we love everybody, so tolerant, sin, and get engaged in it, and go clubbing with everybody. It's fun. You know, we can do this. We're Christians.
So how does that sound? You go to Iraq and Kurdistan and you say, my warning for you is don't be like us.
Wow. So when we talk about us, what are we like? What is really going on? I mean, we look at Ukraine. We've seen the Jeffrey Epstein situation. We don't even know. I think the average American, what we've seen over the last 3 years, 4 years, makes us all go, well, we found out COVID-19 is a scam. We find out, so what is going on? And are we the ones driving this across the world? You know, whatever you can tell me. Do we trust the FBI, the CIA, the DOD? We've heard so many things. You're telling me there's good guys that are helping you go out there and do SWATs and bring these pedophiles to justice. But yet at the same time, we hear the governmental involvement in so many evils that we're trying to sort this out and figure out who can we trust and what is America's involvement in this Ukraine and everything we see. Do you see a big picture?
I do. Depends on where you want to start. If we go all the way back to your first question, are we headed to World War III? No. The answer is no.
Okay.
Now, if I had to pick a yes or no, that's an easy one. No.
All right.
Now, if you're looking at a timeline, depending on what that looks like, because the thing I like to tell people is when you're learning history, you have this little timeline, right? 1929, this happened to Hitler. 1932, this happened. 1936, 1939, 1941. Well, that's 4, 5, 10, 20 years in between these little hash marks on the timeline. So we are too often caught up in the current and trying to prognosticate what's going to happen next. So are we moving towards World War III? Yes, the whole world is moving towards World War III. Are we heading towards the end? Are we heading towards the end times? Yes, we're heading towards the end times. But we're not. I don't personally believe we're in the end times, and I don't personally believe we're moving towards World War III. And I take that off of history, and I take that off of my biblical reading. I'll also say something that I don't think you've ever heard before, and we have very, very few people that talk about it. Chinese is not a military threat to the United States.
Wow.
China is an economic threat to the United States.
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
as a strategist, as a soldier, again, history is important.
Yes, it is.
In the history of China, thousands and thousands and thousands of years of China, who have they ever invaded? They supported North Korea. We've got issues between Taiwan and Hong Kong, but it isn't the culture. So when somebody stands up and says China's a military threat, you have to discount thousands and thousands of years of history and culture. So unless you can show me that the Chinese culture, the Chinese war machine has shifted into something else, I don't buy it. The other piece that comes to that is since 9/11, we've been fighting a ground war in the Middle East. The Navy was not involved in that ground war. The Navy had to validate their budget for many, many, many years. So while the ground fighting forces are in the Middle East fighting and putting out brush fires of Al-Qaeda and ISIS all across the globe, the Navy's in Pentagon explaining what they need to do, and they create this behemoth known as China. It's garbage. People forget about China as a military threat. It's not going to happen.
It's economic.
Which is what you need to look at, okay?
Yeah.
Where are all of our iPhones?
Yeah.
Where are all of those iPhones made? So I really get tired of the hypocrisy of what people want to talk about, but what actually needs to be done is bring jobs back to the United States and stop giving, which is another reason we're not moving towards World War III. We are so economically intertwined.
Yeah.
Unless somebody can tip the scales on how there's more money to be made by going to war with Russia.
Let's talk about Putin then.
Yep.
All right.
So
Putin
on that
has
same-
said,
yep.
coming off the nuclear arms treaty, not going to honor it.
Yep.
Is that a threat?
Big surprise. Yes, so it's, again, using the same logic with China. The history of Russia, they have always been an aggressor. They have always tried to take over other nations. They've never, ever been satisfied with what Russia was. Until the end of the world comes, every few years, Russia will push east and move into the continent of Europe. Again, we know this. You go all the way back to their history.
So when we talk about Ukraine, in the beginning, it was Putin and Russia saying there's bioweapons facilities there. They're trying to make more bioweapons. There's money laundering going on with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and all of these Bidens and Burisma and all these corruption. You said earlier, the Ukraine has been a place, a seedbed for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And kind of a dirty nation.
Yep.
So it looked like we have got people early on in Ukraine. One of the parliament members said, we're not just fighting for Ukraine, we're fighting for the New World Order. That was like a, whoa, like,
Yeah.
okay, we're funding this. We've put so many unbelievable amounts, billions, double digit, it's now triple, billions of dollars there.
Yeah.
It looks like we're either trying to cover something, we're trying to stoke a war, because we were the ones that kept kind of basically putting things on the line to like stroke the bear. The Bible says put a hook in the bear's jaw and pull him into war. So I'm just trying to figure these things out.
Yeah.
Why are we doing these things?
Very
And why are they?
crazy.
We've got that World Economic Forum who touts a great reset, global government. It looks like we're being drawn into conflict that would create such a huge situation that it would give the Klaus Schwabs of the world, the World Economic Forum, the opportunity to bring their New World Order, their Great Reset. Biden's got up and talked about the New World Order.
Yeah.
It looks like we're on the precipice of that. And that's why I asked about the World War III and Putin.
Yep. A lot to unpack there, but it actually isn't, it's not going to be that hard for me. It's not going to be that hard. So one of the things that I would talk about is the specificity of words and how words and titles get shifted. So let me go back to the first question of Russian aggression into Ukraine. This is unabashed Russian aggression into Ukraine. We can talk about all day on how Ukraine is corrupt, et cetera, et cetera. They're no more corrupt than any other nation in the United States. Like Victor said in your last piece, they're no more corrupt than the United States. So what's interesting is we just came off of a surveillance course where these survivors from trauma came. It was too cold in Colorado Springs to stand out there on the range and teach them to shoot. So we taught them how to do surveillance and counter-surveillance. And their job was to follow this made-up exercise where they were figuring out a pimp came to town, and he was recruiting girls, and he was selling them to these buyers, et cetera. So they followed all these guys all around Colorado Springs for about 5 hours. One of the most important things we teach them is what we call is cover for action, or what's your cover story. So if they're following one of these victims into Victoria's Secret, and the woman that works there says, "Oh, can I help you?" What are you going to say? If you follow them into a hotel and the hotel manager says, "Can I help you?" What are you going to say? If you follow them into a rental car place and the rental car person says, "Can I help you?" What are you going to say? If the mall security cop sees you kind of acting weird and he walks up to you and says, "What is it you're doing?" So you need to have a cover for action for everything you take. And it needs to be plausible enough to get beyond first level scrutiny. All of that garbage you just talked about with the biolabs and Ukraine being Nazified and the threat of the UN on the doorstep of Russia is simply Putin's cover for action. Really? None of it is true, but it has just enough hint of truth to pass first level scrutiny.
But even when you have a parliament member in Ukraine saying that, we physically saw her say that.
Say New World Order. But now defining needs to come into play. So you're talking different languages, you're talking all these types of things. When you go back to George Bush with 9/11 and when we invaded Iraq, he clearly said, "You're either for us or against us," right? He split sides. So in many ways, even back then, when we were attacked, there was a new world order that needed to define itself. You can tell whose side everyone was on by what they have in their arms. If they have an AK-47 in their arms, they were supported by the Soviet Union and Russia. If they have an M16 in their arms, they were supported by the United States. You can go country by country: Syria, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Israel, all through Central America. So we've been in this new world order for a long time. Who does Iran stand with? Who does China stand with? Who does Russia stand with? Who does Turkey stand with? That's the new world order.
Yeah.
They're the bad guys. And then you've got a bunch of these hooligans like down in Venezuela and some of these other countries that align themselves. But we have to recognize there is an alignment. And it all goes back to similar things. Iran needs economic stability. China wants economic hegemony. Russia is just purely aggressive. And then when you go back to the Turks, it's the same thing. And tell me if you guys have heard this before. The Turks are moving towards the reclamation of the Ottoman Empire. They want their glory days. Just like Al-Qaeda wanted the caliphate, it's what's been driving them. The Turks want to build and expand, and they're using proxy forces all over the world. So you have Turkey, you have Iran, you have China, and you have Russia as this new world order against the West. Ukraine used to be part of the bad guys. Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union. So I would argue when someone from Ukraine says we need to establish this new world order, and Ukraine and Estonia and Latvia and Moldova, they're no longer behind the Iron Curtain. They are on the good guy side that we call the West or the Allies.
What would you say then when you have a Klaus Schwab meeting with a World Economic Forum, and they have leaders they've been grooming for 30 years, and now they're the heads of the countries and states, and they're trying to move us into transhumanism, and they're talking about, and we look around America and we see the fabric of America unraveling around us, where we see justice is injustice, we see a two-tier justice system, we hear things and see things in our military, shocking that they're talking more about social agendas than our armed forces being really, truly battle ready. It's more important that they wear a dress as a male or identify as something. It would appear, if you look everywhere around our school systems and you see kids being groomed, transgenderism, that the American belief system has been broken and that we have evildoers. When you see the Jeffrey Epsteins, all of these things don't say what you're saying to me about America. So that's what I'm trying to figure out, what you're saying there with America, because we see the degradation here, even in just our justice and our capital.
See, I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and. Because, of course, Schwab, I'm not so much concerned about nations as the billionaires that use them as a puppet. I remember we were going to the State Department to do some stuff. Their computer systems were so jacked up from being so old, antiquated. And I've seen things where I'm like, the American government doesn't have the capacity to be conspiracy. I mean,
Yeah.
they often hire not the top person for the roles, but the lowest. It's mind-boggling. In each department or agency, I think there's great men and women. You talk about law
Sure,
enforcement.
absolutely.
I mean, they want to wear the white hat.
FBI, they're good guys.
But
It appears at the top there may not be.
they gotta. But we see this cycle, right? We're on another cycle, and what concerns me most is what the American people are willing to stand for or not, because everything is being eroded.
Our Constitution seems like it's being attacked daily.
Yeah.
You know, that they can censor, and that we're no longer, our constitutional freedoms are being attacked. It appears daily.
Well, and again, Americans are going to have to stand up
Yes.
and say, well, these are the places we draw a line and won't.
Right. But if we don't know the wars going on, like you said about pedophilia and what's
But like
going on.
Antifa, remember when Antifa hit and all that? Jeff actually went into, up in Seattle, one of their big deals. And it was interesting, and people would be surprised to hear this. He went right in the middle of them, right, as kind of doing recon and figuring some things out. And I remember asking him, did you carry? He goes, no. I left my weapon secured in the hotel room. And the reason, and this is the thing people need to understand, is he goes, I'd have to kill people. And he's done plenty of killing.
Yeah.
And he's like, this generation doesn't even understand if I brandish a weapon and say, you need to step back, they'll just keep coming. And it would be, so he'd
As in a
rather.
video game, they just get back up and they're alive again, right?
Yeah,
Well, and that's where I get fatigued with the men in the church talking about how they're going to kill all these people. Like, how many are you going to kill when the war comes? So yeah, I had to make that decision. I'm willing to get beat up and hurt by a bunch of these Antifa children.
Yeah.
So it's a good segue. So when you talk about the New World Order, and what I defined it as was very specifically militaristic. If we're talking about a New World Order where there are good guys and bad guys that will fight each other and will back each other, that's what I'm talking about. If you're talking about a New World Order that doesn't want to see boundaries and things like that, that's another type of discussion.
That is what the World Economic Forum, that is their goal.
But once again, they're living in a bubble of protection. Okay, so let's take this macro idea that we're talking about with global politics and put it down to Antifa in Seattle and Portland. Antifa in Seattle and Portland existed and was able to do what they did because we had a bubble of protection and we allowed it to happen.
Right, but why?
Because that was the choice we made.
Are we not trying to destroy America? Because it sure looks like it.
It was the choice we made. Russia is allowed to invade Ukraine because we have a bubble of protection around Russia and we're allowing them to do it, which is where I am very against the amount of aid that we've been pushing into Ukraine.
Yeah.
We did our work. Here's one more tidbit for y'all. United States Special Forces has been in Ukraine for over a decade, arming those citizens. The Ukrainians did not just rise up one day and fight against Russia. They've been equipped by the United States. They've been trained by the United States. Every single country on the border of Russia, United States Special Forces has been in there year in and year out. And that's gone through the Biden administration, back to the Trump administration, back to the Obama administration, back to the Bush administration. So there are certain things that are quietly done that each administration will continue with. So we've already invested in the defense of Ukraine, and the only reason Ukraine is still standing right now is because of the United States' personal investment, not monetary investment, personal investment in men and women that went over there and trained them and equipped them and gave them the technology to fight off the Russian bear. The rest of Europe is doing what? If I have my numbers right, I think we've sent $14 billion to Ukraine. I think the closest country is Germany or France, which is $1.4 billion. I could be off. There might be something in between. So why is France and Germany and England and Italy and Greece not doing anything to defend their eastern border? So America jumps in to do that? No. We've got to take that bubble away.
And it may be a wrong one, but my understanding is that the only way you bring us into the World Economic Forum's New World Order without boundaries, without borders, where a group of elitists that are in the billionaire category control us, like what we saw through the COVID all of that is that Russia stands in the way, America stands in the way, and China, and that you have to deal with those powers in different ways, but you got to bring them down. And it would appear that everything in every front in America is trying to bring us down. So you look at the Ukraine and you look at the Hunter Biden story. What do you make of that? Is that a cover story?
It's a mouse turd.
It's a what?
It's a mouse turd.
Oh.
It's a little mouse turd on the carpet, and it's what everyone's staring at. Oh,
it's not a big deal that our president that sits in the White House, his son, has cut all these deals.
The president comes in and out every 4 years.
Yeah.
Maybe he does 8. If anyone thinks Biden's in control of anything, you've got another thing
he's a
coming.
puppet.
Okay.
But who's he a puppet to?
The puppet is us. We are the ones that are consuming all of this garbage. So when you look at the environmentalism, when you look like take the discussion of transgenderism and that we're tearing ourselves apart in the United States. There's no one else on the planet talking about that.
Right.
Because
who's driving those agendas? It's not the American people saying they
it's
want.
the wrong question. It's the wrong question. It doesn't
What's the
matter
right
who's
question?
driving the agenda. It's the foolishness to get involved in it. So there's a lot happening. Like again, I go back to what has America done? What have we demanded from our leaders to bring jobs back and to bring factories back in the United States to get off of Chinese production? What have we done? Like everyone wants to talk about, say, the border, the southern border of Mexico. What is the New World Order flooding the border? No, we're not doing anything. I don't understand. Where am I sitting right now? Ohio. But when I live out in Oregon, I don't understand why those of us on the West Coast are pointing to Washington, D.C. and saying, what are you doing? I don't understand that.
Yeah, I guess so. That other than taking the law into our own hands,
It's not taking the law into your own.
How do we, when our government won't enforce the laws that we have at the border, and they keep ICE from doing so? Someone is trying to flood our nation with unvetted immigrants. At the same time, they're trying to emasculate our men. At the same time, they're trying to get kids to transition instead of teaching them education. At the same time that we see across the board law enforcement having their hands tied that they can't enforce our laws.
Yeah.
They're destroying America. It's not the American people doing that. The who is doing it and why.
It is the American.
And let me tell you why.
I think so.
Yeah. One, I agree with everything you just said.
I agree with everything you said.
Happen. We've been on the border.
Yeah.
We've been the first person to bring kids.
Right.
And we've been there. We went to the border. We went to southern Mexico. We crossed into Guatemala. We went to the Darien Gap. We followed the entire trail of the immigrants all the way down to Colombia. The reality is that stuff is being funded, a lot of it by Soros. I mean,
right, yeah.
So you have
But
the
why are we stopping it?
Yeah.
Someone at the top is not for a reason.
So you have these different battles you're going to fight. Mm-hmm. But what Teague is talking about is it's the American people that are
Can't
soft.
be apathetic. Absolutely, I agree with that.
We all look to D.C. That person's going to be gone, right? Or well, who's the next one? I remember. Look, I've sat in the Pentagon and talked about leadership with key leaders. I'll never forget one guy told me who's been around Washington forever, and he goes, what's more important, power or influence? Influence. Influence is what lasts. So you have some people to come in there and flex power. They're going to be gone. Right. I was going to run for Congress. We did a deal. And they said, yeah, your chance of winning is good in this region, but you would lose influence. You have over 1 million followers on social media. Your impact is far greater as an influencer than sitting in your hands tied. I can go to Iraq, right? So the battle starts in the family.
I agree.
Where as a home, I mean, you start there. Then it's the school boards.
Right.
And then it's the
and
churches.
people are rising
teaching.
up against those school boards.
It is.
But I still say someone peddled this to the American people.
Well, that's why I say
come up with the
evil.
idea, let's
No.
transition our kids. Let's put this curriculums in the schools.
Well, that's why I just say that's the bigger picture of evil.
Right.
The
and there is a bigger picture.
There is a picture.
Yeah.
that Satan's God of
That
this
I
world.
agree with you, though. The
power-
apathy of the people has to rise up and go, no, we're not going to have this.
So-
but then we go elect someone. They say they're going to enforce laws and all that. Without law enforcement, without people standing up to evil, we end up finding ourselves back in the same boat over and over.
Here's a point about trafficking. Because sex trafficking gets people's attention like that, right?
Yeah.
I'll never forget when a pimp said, we thank the dads and the uncles for preparing
Yeah,
the girls.
absolutely.
So everybody wants the door kicked in and smash a dude.
But it's a brokenness in the heart and the home.
Yeah,
I agree, is the heart of the matter.
We have a saying, I thought you were going to say it. This is where we're in violent agreement.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at. We can talk about trafficking, we can talk about New World Order. The brokenness is right in our homes.
I agree. And
Right-
if nothing
right in our
else,
homes.
all this brokenness is showing families, there are moms and dads stand up saying, no, we're kicking them off our school board. But if there are powers that are operating at a level of trying to bring us down, and we're allowing the Soroses to go and
Which there
fund
are.
our DAs, our district
Yeah.
attorneys, to where our district attorneys are soft on crime.
We know
they
that.
turn a blind eye to it, and they let the pimp go, and they let the guy go. We have an issue that someone is conspiring to destroy us. Now, we as Americans can stand up to that and say, not on our watch, you're not doing that. But we can't go take to the streets with our AK-47 and start shooting people. Where is our law enforcement? Where is our president? Where are our elected officials?
It's your consumer dollar.
Right.
It's your consumer dollar.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
We are getting smashed by the liberal progressive agenda
Yeah.
because of their leveraging of their buying power.
And they're come together as a monopoly in a one world fashion to
We're
try
bigger.
to destroy us.
We have more people. So
We say, no, you're not getting my money. Go woke, go broke,
exactly.
Disney, right?
But name one thing off the top of your head that we as conservative Christians have stymied over the last years. Now,
Disney's
Roe v.
starting
Roe
to
v.
fail.
Wade. Roe v. Wade was amazing, but that was purely because we used some political mechanisms that we put into as a priority. But when you're talking about our economic strength, we're not unified, and that's where Jordan Peterson talked about this a couple years ago, where. Man, that guy wants to be a Christian. I don't know where he stands right now.
I know.
He wants to be a Christian.
Yeah.
But he says something that people should take to heart. He says, if Christians really believed what they say they believe, we wouldn't be in this world. We wouldn't be in this mess. And that's my point. Everyone wants to talk about Putin or China. Man, they're taking advantage of
weak
what did
country.
what did Putin just say? What was his big thing this morning?
Yeah, he basically said America is legalizing and accepting pedophilia and mutilating children.
Yeah.
And he's attacking our moral stance.
That's his game.
Yeah.
Oh.
He can't beat us. The American fighting man, fighting woman,
Crush him.
unbelievable. And he knows
Well,
it.
they're beating us at the fact that we morally
Right.
are allowing this, but there are people driving that. So I feel like we're like Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a governor. People think of him as, he was a believer. He was a man that believed in God, but he was a governor. And he said, by the fear of God, because of the fear of God, I won't take advantage of the people and take what is rightfully mine as a governor. But he also called the people to say, stop taking this high usury from your brothers and sisters and putting them again back into slavery. And if you do, you're going to be shaken out by God. And he brought the priest in to witness it. You're going to be shaken out like this cloth. But he was calling on not only the people, but also as a leader, as a governor, as a senator, as a congressman to stand up. Because I look at Republicans, I look at Democrats, and I go, both of you are playing some of the same games. You're in bed together, many of you, and the ones that aren't are being, they manipulate in the media to try to completely blackball them to make it where nobody believes anything they say when they're calling out what's going on. But it's too much of an effort to me that doesn't look happenstance. Because I know for a fact, Americans didn't go, you know what, I think it's a good idea for us to transition our children. No, medical hospitals are making incredible, $1 million plus dollars per child
There was a
to
movement.
transition them.
It was Americans that made that movement, and it's been the undercurrent for.
They
10,
might have been a
10, 15,
minority,
20.
but I don't see. I see parents furious, and they're like, "What?
Yeah.
This is going on in our schools?"
The problem is there's no faith in action.
Yep.
Do you not think we couldn't smoke Soros tomorrow?
Well, yeah, but where are the authorities doing that? And Epstein and all these people.
But here's my point. Here's my point. Would it change anything?
It would show to me an example that we're not going to put up with this. We'll deal with the people that try to buy our DAs or try to
Sister,
fix
it's just a chess piece.
Yeah.
Soros gets knocked off,
a pawn.
another one.
And
But if you take out enough of them,
but you can't. You don't.
we
win
need
it.
a revival.
You don't
There's
win
no
chess
doubt.
you
We
don't-
need a revival.
You don't win chess with your pawns. It's that back row.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about the spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm getting at.
That's
People need to stop
I
getting
agree, it's
so
both.
involved because it's it's right here in your church.
I agree that it's
Epstein.
both because of what you do,
Right.
it's both. We can't just teach what we're supposed to believe and do in the church without going and rescuing the child that's in trafficking. So to me, it's like we got to get involved with the government. We got to get involved in these arenas, expose these evildoers.
I agree.
Know what their agenda
But
is,
it
know what
has
they're
to-
up to,
it has to be-
and spiritually get a revival. Like Nehemiah, build the wall while you fight like hell.
So what you're talking about is strategy and leadership.
Right.
And that's what we need in this day and age. And that's what Colonel Teague was referencing is we don't have a strategy as a right or Christians or whatever. That's about, and we need the power of God to lead that.
Mm-hmm.
But Epstein, we get so tired of hearing that. Because I'm like, I understand what that represents.
Right.
But I go, just take every girl that could possibly have been brought to the island and used. And then take the list of the abusers. But every girl, what do you want to put it at? 100, 200 girls over the years?
I'm thinking more of the influence of those leaders that are getting away with it. If we called them into account, it would send, just like a holy fear of God, the law brings that brought us to salvation. If the law is being enforced, people would say, whoa, I don't want to touch that.
Okay, but we'll shoot them all. Boom, boom, boom,
Okay.
cut off the privates. Okay, and say, don't do this. There's a new group that's going to come up.
But they'll know there's justice.
They don't care. They don't care. Justice should always be served as a deterrent.
Right.
But what we're saying is 200
Hard.
girls, that was done last night here in Ohio, in y'all city. Guarantee you that. Last night in Columbus, there were more children abused in their own homes, or moms pimping out their kids, or their moms tucking their kids in and going to a hotel and turning a trick. It's, everybody wants to do this because of what it represents, just like Hollywood. It's like, hey, folks, you got to get the foundation.
Sure.
Right.
It's not either or to me, it's both.
Yeah, it's both and.
All of it.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's both and.
It's not either
Said
or,
it
it's
earlier,
both and. Yeah.
And that's where some pastors are like, I don't want to get into political issues. It's like, well, you should, because ultimately for you, people don't want to get involved in stuff until it affects them.
Yeah.
Some of our donors and prayer people have been so affected by sex trafficking or abuse, they're like, we'll never stop. They get it. But pastors need to understand, if they don't stand up for the right leaders in our nation, all the way up, they're coming for the word.
Oh, yeah, they are.
They want to stop the gospel. That's the big
Freedom
picture.
of speech is gone.
That's the
Then
big picture. And
you still preach
yeah.
the gospel, just like what you're saying. You still
Yeah.
preach the gospel, but you might do it at gunpoint and death. So I'd rather preach the gospel with a little freedom, but I want the conviction and the commitment that comes from the person that's doing it at gunpoint, right? Yeah.
I love our director of empowerment and outreach, Samantha. She's a survivor from the sex industry. And the first time I heard her say this, she said, our churches should not be a community of saints, but an emergency room of people bleeding all over the floor. And I want to see more of that.
Sure. And
We
I
have-
applaud you
we
and what
have
you've done. You're
children,
a hero. Both of
girls.
you are American heroes. No, you are.
We're following
Because
God's
you
call.
You went to where the problem was. You were sent by a government. You were funded by a government, and you had arms by a government. But even if the government wouldn't do that, our conviction should say we obey God rather than man. Whatever.
And the caveat to what Samantha's saying, then we have to have a part of the church that's healthy, that nobody's bleeding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
That
agree.
because you brought them into the ER,
Yeah.
the hospital helped them, and now they're free and healthy. They don't have
Right.
to.
And that only comes from the preaching of the gospel
Yeah.
all day
True.
long, right?
True.
You know, we know that science, medicine, anything a person can do, is limited, but God, and that's why I'm excited. I believe we're starting to see the rumblings of a Jesus revolution like we saw in the 60s, which was an answer in a way to Vietnam. It was an answer to the drug problem. It was an answer to all these ills of society. At the end of the day, it is a transformation of the heart, and we're in complete agreement with that for sure.
Thank
you know, we
you.
can't just do the surface stuff and think, oh, I gave my money in the offering.
Right.
I, voted for someone. I gave this party some money. No, we have to be, and we have to raise our voices and say loudly, not on our watch. We have a constitution, we have freedom, but if we don't fight for that constitution
We'll lose it.
and that freedom that was founded in our nation, we won't have freedom anymore.
And great price was paid for.
Yes, yes. And
Thank you.
I don't like preaching with armed guards around the room, being told you can't lead people to salvation. You can't say this. You can't say that. It is a government, and God instituted government. He instituted laws and order and justice to back up what we preachers have to do and need to do and what we believers need to be doing. Everybody. I kind of feel like this is like the fivefold ministry gifts.
Yeah.
You get the evangelist and he'll
Oh,
say,
yeah.
what I'm doing is the most important thing.
salvation.
And then the pastor will say, no, what I'm doing is the most important thing. And the
equip.
prophet, it's like what we're all doing together.
That's right.
Every joint supplies. And that's what brings the kingdom of God into every sphere of influence. I talk about that in Fight Like Heaven. We have to invade the area that God gave us. So I appreciate you, Victor. Appreciate you, Jeff. And thank you
for
for
having
your
us here.
service.
Yeah.
You are heroes, and you're fighting. You're still on the front lines fighting for women and children, and that is the orphans and children, today that have been orphaned either by a family life, by a fatherless home, a motherless home, a fatherless and motherless home, and that is pure religion. So I appreciate that very much.
Thanks for being an influence and giving us the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, and people, I want to encourage you, check out victormarx.com, check out the fight and what you can do. We do need to fund it. We need to be active doing it. We need to be modeling it, most importantly, in our families and our homes. Our ministry and our church are full of families that have been transformed, and we've seen the change in fathers and mothers, and the gospel is the only thing that can transform. We can legislate from the outside, and that does hold evil at bay, but the heart has to be changed. The heart of the pedophile, the heart of the fearful that won't stand up and speak up. We have to get involved and engage. Whatever area God's called you to engage, I encourage you, do it. This is the hour to do it. There's never been a time that I've seen or heard in our nation's history where the American dream, our Constitution, is in greater peril, and apathy and laziness will cause us to lose our freedoms, lose our nation. But we're already losing if we don't engage in our own homes, our own communities, and our own churches. And like Jeff said, that is where the battle really is won, in the local community. So I encourage you today, stay on guard, get engaged, pray, and don't fight like hell, fight like heaven. But sometimes we have to fight fire with fire. You take the weapons, sometimes you've taken them into Iraq, you've used some physical weapons that are forged, the Bible says, to be able to stop evil. And so I encourage you, wherever you're at, have impact and stop evil and stay on guard. We'll see you next time. There are a lot of Christians who would tell you, a lot of leaders, a lot of pastors that would tell you, don't talk about certain things. In many ways, the church at large has been outwitted by Satan. We don't want to be silent about these things. We want to speak up. It takes courage. It takes boldness. But if we don't address and expose the deeds of darkness, then they take over. We must counter it. We must know our enemy. We must know our adversary, and we must know what his tactics are. We cannot be complacent anymore. You have influence. God has placed you in a sphere of influence. You are a soldier of the light. We need to be straightforward with the truth. Help us to be strong, God. Help us to do our part, Father, to be disciplined, to be ready, to be soldiers of light, soldiers of truth. God, help us to be on guard.